So, Dr. Elena Villanueva, I'm really excited to interview you today because we're going to go through some important areas of how people can reverse anxiety and depression and other related health issues. It's great. I happen to have spent the morning interviewing some of your patients. I'm really impressed with the work that you're doing. I'm impressed with your drugless approach. And I think that that's when you're really starting to deal with root causes, and you're a very responsible person as well. So I know that you're not somebody that's like, advocating for people to do this, that, and the other, or get off things that they need to be taking. So we're dedicated to healing the body. This is something that you're good at, and let's dive in.
Sounds good. I'm excited about it.
Excellent. And why is it that you're doing what you're doing?
I'm doing what I'm doing because I don't want to see one more person struggle with depression and anxiety and think about taking their lives. We've got over 3,000 people a day that take their lives. The statistics, I'm sure, are even worse than what we can read. And I'm on a mission, and it is my mission and it is my passion to get the word out there and to be able to help as many people as possible, to show them a way that if their medications haven't been working for them, and if they have been struggling and are losing hope, that there is hope and that there are things that we can do that are helping already thousands of people around the country who are trying these different, more natural, commonsensical approaches.
Awesome, I love that. Thank you. So let's dive in. Let's have a look at what can be done to heal the body. Let's have a look at how we can help reverse some of these problems at their root cause. But before actually we go there, let's have a look at what you think are the major causes for depression, anxiety today, and other related health conditions. When I say other related health conditions, I'm talking about things that are bipolar being something that would be considered depression, but it's another form, or we could look at other types of illnesses that fall under that banner. For example, somebody with thyroid conditions could have it's diagnosed as depression or bipolar, but it's a thyroid condition. So that's why I'm saying related conditions, to widen the net a little bit. But coming back to what it is that you see as the causative factors for these types of conditions, what do you see?
What I see that I reveal to all of my clients when they first come in is that I tell them that there's always more than one cause. There are oftentimes 3, 4, or 5 different systemic engines in the body that are not working properly. And it's when that happens that the seesaw, so to speak, teeters, and the person starts to manifest symptoms of disease. The body is very resilient, so the body can handle typically one thing that's a little bit off balance. But when you start compounding it, so if you take, for example, a little bit of underactive thyroid, maybe they've been diagnosed with a mild hyperthyroid from their health practitioner. Typically, a person can overcome that. Their adrenals will compensate. The exercise that they're doing or the way that they're eating, if they're eating clean, will help compensate for that. But if you start compounding an underactive thyroid diagnosis along with a parasite infection, along with toxins from their environment or their foods, like fluoride or pesticides, when you start compounding the issues, that's when people start to manifest symptoms. And they can manifest symptoms in a variety of different ways, whether it's a diagnosis of bipolar or a diagnosis of Hashimoto's. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that we find the root cause of the problem, and it's never one problem. There's usually 3, 4, or 5 problems going on at once.
That's great to know. And you're someone that's seen this in your patients, you've seen it in your own life, and you've seen it in your family. And so when you look at some of those scenarios, particularly those close to home, yourself, your father, what do you see as being the core influences for you and for your family members that have suffered with depression?
The core influences for them? We don't really know why my father took his life. And he was a surgeon, a well-respected man, yeah, we don't really know why that happened. We can only suspect. But what I would like to talk about,
Yeah,
since
please.
we're talking about this, there's such a stigma behind depression or even suicide. It's been this shameful thing that nobody ever wants to talk about. And I think that we need to address this stigma. We need to address the stigma. This stigma needs to go away. It's time for people like us to speak out and to make people understand that there shouldn't be a stigma and there shouldn't be any shame for the families of the victims who have actually taken their life. My father took his life, and we all felt like we had to protect him and to protect ourselves. And so we told everyone that he had a heart attack. And the reason that I am now coming forth is because my job is to help other people. And we need to be able to understand how we can help people so that they don't take their lives. And we need to be able to help the families of the people who have taken their lives so that they don't have shame around what's happened, or that they had a family member who was diagnosed with bipolar. Yeah, I probably didn't do very good with that. But
No, you did amazing. And like, especially when we're talking about this, come down with me here and like forget the cameras are rolling. I'm curious what it was like for you to have gone through the trauma of losing your dad and then kind of feel almost forced to have to tell a lie to protect the family. What did that feel like for you?
I was so numb and so in shock. All of us were. It creates a ripple effect that no words can describe when someone takes their life, whether it's a friend or a brother or a cousin or your parent or your spouse. It creates a rip in your spirit and a numbness that you can't even put into words. At the time when that happened, all I could do was just to take one step forward at a time. I didn't even know what to do. I felt like my whole universe was gone.
Yeah.
I felt like I was completely disconnected from everyone. And at the time when we decided to tell everyone that my father had had a heart attack, we all thought that that was the best thing to do. We didn't want any stigma. We didn't want the negativity surrounding that to affect my father's legacy and the amazing things that he did for people. He was passionate about his work, and he was very good at his work, and he loved his patients, and he loved his family, and he loved his friends, and he was the most amazing father, an amazing friend, an amazing person that you would ever know. And we did what we thought was right to protect him. Exactly. At the time.
Exactly, and I have zero judgment on that as well. It's just a lot to have to experience, right? And how old were you at the time?
It was 2006. So that would be 6, 7, 8, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So that would make me 47, 37, 36, 35 years old.
Yeah.
I was 35.
Mm-hmm.
I spiraled into depression after that happened.
Really?
I spiraled into depression, and I couldn't pull myself out.
What was driving that for you, the depression?
Looking back, it was the trigger of losing my father.
Yeah.
And losing him in such a traumatic way as well. It was hard to pick up the pieces. I felt completely shattered, and he was my parent. What can I say? And he was an amazing parent. And to lose anyone in your family is going to be traumatic, and it's going to be a huge loss. To lose someone in a traumatic way, such as suicide or a horrible car accident or something like that, it's a traumatic trigger that literally can change your genetic expression, and it can change your body chemistry, and it changes it because of of the emotional aspect, of the spiritual aspect of the trauma.
Yep. And so the grief, how did you overcome that depression that you were in? Yeah.
Before I overcame it, it took me years to overcome that.
Yeah.
It caused a ripple effect that, first I had the shock, and then the grief and the feeling of loss, and then I started having to deal with my own depression from within. All of the changes that started happening and the way that I was perceiving the world around me completely changed. I had 4 practices, and I ended up losing everything. I became so ill with my depression, and it spiraled into anxiety and then brain fog and memory loss, and I then lost my words, and I couldn't speak. I couldn't form my words, and this was over the course of about 3 years that it progressively kept getting worse and kept getting worse, and I ended up losing everything. I lost everything because I couldn't function, and I tried the prescription medications. I tried some counseling. I tried the counseling in the church also. I tried everything that I knew available to me, everything that most of us know in our culture here in the United States. I tried everything that was available to me. Nothing was working. And I even trying to reach out at the very end to some friends, and they didn't know what to do. They felt helpless to be able to help pull me out of there, and I lost everything. And I was just very, very fortunate that after I lost everything that I had, including my own home, and I was homeless for a short period of time. And it's a crazy story. I'm not embarrassed about it. I'm very, very fortunate that after losing everything and literally living out of my car, that I started to find the answers. And right around the time that I had lost all hope and had thought about even ending my life, I have been there, and I will share that with my clients. I will share that with them because I want them to know that I understand where they have been. I'm highly educated. I always had it put together. I built 4 practices on my own. And I knew that if I had been able to do that once, that if I could just find the answers to the causes of my problems, that I would be able to put my life back together again. And sure enough, the answers did come to me little by little, in little pieces and little bits, and I was able to find the root causes of my problems, which included dire necessity for gut work. I started taking antibiotics when I was an infant, and probably by the time I was 3 or 4 years old had probably been under 12 to 15 to 20 rounds of antibiotics. And so I was a very, very sick young child, and I had food sensitivities and allergies like crazy when I was a kid. So, I discovered that I needed to do gut work. I discovered that I had some genetic alterations that were not allowing some of my systemic engines to work properly, mainly the engines that are driving my dopamine production in my brain, for example. I was able to learn that I had different nutritional deficiencies, and I was able to learn, how the body chemistry works, really getting back to the basics of biochemistry and understanding how your body's engines work. And little by little, I was able to start picking up my engines and getting my engines working optimally again. And as I addressed my body's engines, so to speak, all of the symptoms started to go away. And now I help people. Now my mission and my passion and my goal in life is to show other people what I was able to do that has helped me. And the methodologies that I've developed through my own experience are helping hundreds of people.
Wow. We're about to touch hundreds of thousands and millions. And I know that that's something that you're ready for.
Yeah, I am ready for that.
Yeah. And that's a door that you've knocked on because you felt called to. and everything that's happened to you is being used for a purpose. And that's one of the most redemptive and beautiful things we can do with life experiences, and you're certainly doing that. So it's very admirable, and I think a lot of people look at you like a superwoman because you've been able to weather the storm, and I think that you're a beacon of hope for people to, you know, go through so much, lose so much, and then yet still not give up. And you know, you would have had every reason to as well. And I think that there was a your husband today, Greg.
Yes.
Husband, partner?
Mm-hmm.
Husband, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
we just got married in June.
Exactly. So he wasn't around then. So you were quite alone, right?
I was a single mother.
Yeah.
It was a big struggle and super scary. And then going through that, it was the scariest thing I've ever been through in my life, to go through depression and anxiety and to have the perception of the world around you completely turned upside down. It's very, very scary. It can make you feel hopeless and make you feel alone.
You felt alone?
Of course I felt alone. And I was embarrassed. I felt so embarrassed because I was supposed to be I was the doctor in town. I was the sports medicine doctor in town, and I was supposed to be the one that had the answers for the sports injuries, and I was supposed to be the really well put together mom. People saw me in town as, wow, you know, look at this mother, this single mother look at all the businesses, you know, look at what she's doing. She's traveling with Olympic athletes. She's, you know, she has 4 practices. She started from nothing as a single mom. And that's what people saw, but what they didn't know was that I was breaking on the inside. And I was embarrassed and ashamed, and I didn't want people to know about that. I didn't even want my mom to know, because she was so devastated by the loss of the love of her life, of her husband, that I didn't want to reach out to my mother, and I didn't want her to know that I was completely breaking on the inside. And when I lost my house and I left in my car with the gas and the couple $100 that I had and my dog in the car and a hamper full of clothes in the trunk, I was too embarrassed to call my mother, because I thought that everyone needed to see me in this light. And that when I was breaking, that I felt like I didn't know what people were going to think. It was the stigma around being depressed, that I didn't want people to know that. And I was so embarrassed and ashamed, I literally left in my car and didn't even tell my mother where I was going.
Wow. 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 And for you, like, I mean, you love your mother loves you, and then to not be able to voice the pain that you're experiencing, what did that feel like for you, to experience such levels of pain, but then to keep that a secret from anyone, shielding anyone from actually being able to help you or tell you that they cared, or to love you in your pain? What was that like, to wear that mask so fitly and so?
It was killing me. It was killing me on the inside. To keep something in like that and not share it with your tribe and allow the people around you who love you to help you, it was, of course, it was making things worse.
Do you think that had anything to do with your father? Do you think that his experience, have you ever thought that experience you went through, that you'd be willing to shield to such level that you were on the edge, but nobody knew, you couldn't tell anyone? Do you feel like he might have felt like that?
I do. I do. I have thought about that he probably didn't want to share. We still don't know. That will always be the question that we'll always wonder. You know, did he get a diagnosis that was terminal, that perhaps he thought that he didn't want to be a burden on my mother? Or was he struggling with depression and he never said anything? We have no idea. But we wish that he would have reached out so that we could have grabbed him and put our arms around him and done whatever we could for him. I mean, we would do that for any of us, right? I mean, I think the basic premise of our very core of our being is to love one another and to help one another, whether we're blood family or not. We want to help people. But in certain cultures, in this culture, we're taught to shove everything down. We don't know how to process. We haven't learned how to process traumas, and we haven't learned how to process our feelings. We just shove them down. Because if we talk about them, we're afraid that we'll get a negative response, right?
Yeah.
And when people come talk to me in my office, when they walk through that door, there's no judgment. They need to know that when they walk through the door, they can be who they are, they can feel how they feel, and it's okay. And a lot of people who come see me, I believe, are going through the same thing because they're taught to shove it down and they haven't found answers. So it just compounds and it gets worse. The problem keeps getting worse.
Wow, that's really helpful. And yeah, the silence of not reaching out, and I think about you now as the daughter. It's what, 16 years or so, or 12 years past the suicide of your own father, and I think about the longing that you have there to then, having passed through perhaps a situation that had some resemblance of what he went through, some resemblance of shielding something and some isolation that he felt that he had to create based on an identity that he'd created for himself, an identity that you'd created for yourself, which is based on performing an achievement and meeting society's standards, and then suffering on the inside, because it's a very Spartan mentality, where you look at that society where a child, even with defects, would be left to freeze to death in the snow, just because he didn't have something that would allow him to be able to be the fittest and most prolific athlete or soldier. And this is like natural to human nature to kind of be like that, but then to open up but anyway, I think about the longing that you have, just like Dad, like if only you could just like reach out and let us know what you're experiencing, like we could help, even though you think we can't, like, or even if we can't help, I mean, we just want to know, we want to care about you, we want to suffer with you. We don't want you to, you know what I mean? What would you say to your dad? What, like, if you could talk to him right now, or you could go back to the moment, because it's relevant to families that are watching, what would you say?
Just talk to me. Tell me what's going on. Let's find a solution together. I'll move mountains for you. We'll all move mountains for you. Please just tell us what's going on and let us help you figure it out. We'll figure it out together. We're a tribe. We're your family. We love you. Give us a chance to help you figure this out. That's what I would have said to him. Because what if we could have fixed it? What if we could have fixed it? But, we just don't know that now.
Yeah. How do you deal with that absence of closure on that?
It took years, but I've had closure, and I can talk about it now.
Yeah.
And I can talk about my story, which is pretty crazy and amazing. Like, I've had a crazy wild ride, and I'm in an amazing place now, and I'm helping hundreds of people, and I have an amazing life, and I have amazing friends, and I've healed myself, and I'm healthier than I think I ever was, actually.
It's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I see it, I do see it, and there's certain things I think that we feel in our gut when it comes to people and their mood and their temperament, and I really feel that around you. I really feel genuinely like welcomed and appreciated, and I feel actually, funny enough, permission to be myself in front of you, which is something that came at a great cost to you, to be able to open your heart in that way, to have people feel at ease with you, because you had to learn how to do that for your own self first, and then you created a space for people, and I think you create that in your practice. You allow people to feel comfortable so they can share, and you can actually get to the root of the problem, and that's a beautiful thing. and one that cost a lot for you.
It did cost a lot to me, but I have learned that being true to ourselves and being true to myself and learning who I was or learning who I am apart from my identity that I created for myself is how I have rebuilt myself stronger than I ever was. And I truly believe that the truth will set you free. Come out and speak your truth. And everyone's truth is going to be something different, but speak your truth, because not only is it going to help you, you're going to help millions of people, because it creates a what do you call it? It creates a trickle effect, right? It creates a trickle effect. If you're true to yourself and you speak your truth and you have honor in that, you will be able to help other people, and you'll be able to manifest your destiny of why you were put here on this earth.
Talk to me about your protocol. How do you help people with depression, anxiety, and other health issues at large? How do you approach it? Where do you start? What are the key aspects that you outline? Talk to me in detail so the person watching can actually follow that same system wherever they are in the world. We can talk. Let's talk about lab tests. Let's talk about areas to look out for. Let's talk about diet. Let's talk about things to eliminate, things that we can see for a fact cause issues with the gut, the brain, and how people can kind of dive into this sequentially, how long they should wait until they expect to see a change, until they, you shouldn't do something for 2 years and have no responses and keep doing it, so what's the number, right? So I'm going to ask you everything here. Let's dive in. So what, and certainly we actually should get results fairly fast if we're on the right track, but then the results may take a while to fully turn the whole health around, but we should see results fairly quickly. When I say quickly, I mean, let's talk about those numbers, but let's dive in. Where do you start? Take me through the sequence.
Well, one of the first questions that people ask is, how long does the process take? Well, we have to remember that when you're looking at the biochemistry of the body, things can only change so fast. So some things will change faster and other things will lag behind a little bit, but they'll catch up. I always tell everyone who wants to talk to me about my methodology that I've developed for helping people to overcome their health issues is, give me 90 days. Give me 90 days to work with you. And if you don't see big enough changes happen in 90 days, then maybe my program isn't right for you. But if you can commit 1,000% to everything that I'm asking you to do, you are going to see big changes in 90 days. And I can say that because I've been doing this for a while, so I've been able to see it myself with the people that I've worked with. Typically, I like people to stick with me for a minimum of 6 months. 6 months to really get big turnaround on their body chemistry, on their brain chemistry. But 90 days, there's some magic that can happen inside of 90 days.
Perfect. So continue. Let's dive into the protocols. Where do we start? What do we look for? How do you help diagnose the causative factors for the problem? And just take me through where you'd start. So let's say I've come in here. Hey, I've got depression. I got anxiety. I got the works. Help me. Where do you start with me? How do you take me through a whole process here?
So we need to look at the model that you've come from and what you've been doing that hasn't worked for you. The model that you've come from or that you've been in for your treatments are based off of a diagnosis and then a prescription to treat the symptoms. When you come into the health model or the holistic model, we don't diagnose. We don't really care about the diagnosis. We're looking for the underlying causes of the problems. And in my methodology, we're very, very data-based. So we're super data-based in the way that we do things. So we're going to order labs. Anything from doing very extensive blood testing to look at thyroid function, to look at thyroid function and gut function and kidney function and so on and so forth, to looking at genetic testing, looking at there are actual tests that we can do to look at gut function so that we can see exactly what the gut is doing. We can look at neurotransmitters, and that's a big one for what we're talking about today. Neurotransmitter testing is completely underutilized. There are going to be people out there who say that it's not accurate, but look at what's been doing, look at what the current solutions are. The current solutions are not really that accurate either. They're not working. It's a completely failed model. So there may be some people who don't agree with neurotransmitter testing, who think that maybe it's not super accurate. But I can tell you that with everyone that I work with, we do neurotransmitter testing. And then we'll do other ancillary tests like blood, genetics, hormones, looking at gut function, so that we can uncover all the stones. We have to play detective, and we have to figure out what different engines are not working. What are the multiple causes that are contributing to the way that you're feeling, to this multitude of symptoms that you have, including depression and anxiety. So we order the labs that we need to order, and then we start spreading them out on the table, and we start looking at the labs, and we start finding what things are out of balance, what different biochemical processes are out of balance in the body. And once we find them all, then we triage and we figure out, okay, what do we need to work on first? And that is a big key. There are a lot of people who have done a lot of research to try to heal themselves, who have already done a lot of testing when they come in, and they know the different things that are going on with them. They know that they have a thyroid issue. They know that they've had this underlying chronic infection, whether it's parasitic or fungal or bacterial or viral. They know that they've got a thyroid issue, and they know that they have a hormone issue, but they don't know in what order to take care of it. And so that's where I come in, and I show them, well, let's do this first. And after 30 days, let's retest and see if we've made progress here. And then we'll do the second 30-day sprint, and we're going to work on this and this and this. And so that's the approach that I take. It's just looking at the data and letting the data decide what the plan of action needs to be and in what order that we need to address the body's systemic engines to get them up and running again.
Great. So let's talk about these tests. So let's do a hierarchy here. If someone can only do one test, which one is it? And what's the cost range that you find it's between? And then let's look at the 2 or 3 other tests that can be done. So what would you say is like the number one that you would go for personally, and what's the cost there?
So the first test that I would order would be what we call the functional blood chemistry panel. It is just an extensive array of values that we're looking at in the blood. It's more extensive than what a typical health practitioner would order for their patients. And that runs around $250 to $260. And really it depends on where the person is going. Sometimes it can be more. Testing like that can run upwards of $1,500 to $2,000.
Why would it be so high?
It's because of our medical system. They charge outrageous fees for that. Whenever you find holistic doctors to work with, we typically are in groups where we have been able to get discounted prices on the blood work. But for the amount of values that we're wanting to see in the blood, if you just went out on your own, to go and get it without insurance, you would pay $1,500 to $2,000 for that.
Well, thank you for that. That's a great saving. I would say that the person watching can contact doctors in this series to do that, including yourself.
There are thousands of us, hundreds of us around the country who have access to these co-ops that we're able to get the blood at a much more affordable, or to this blood testing at a much more affordable price.
Perfect. And then, so that's the number one, and the reason for that is it's a blood panel, so they draw blood, and then they're going to work out where some deficiencies are. Is that
yes.
Right?
So with the extensive blood work that we're looking at, the reason why I like to order that first is because it's giving us the broadest view of what's going on.
Great.
with the client. So we can look at everything from their thyroid function to liver and gallbladder function, gut function, how they're metabolizing their sugars and carbohydrates, if they're having mineral imbalances, if they're having malabsorption issues, if they have systemic inflammation. We can look at a very, very broad range. There's a lot of things that we have to look at if we really want to find the root cause. So to only do one test, that's really, really, really hard if you're trying to help the person to figure out what's going on. But that would be the first one that I would order. And if someone is coming to us with depression and anxiety, the second test that I'm going to want to order on them is the neurotransmitter testing, so that we can look and see what the chemistry in their brain is doing.
Perfect. And so talk to me about that test. What's the benefits of that? And well, let's firstly go, what's the cost of that? What's the benefit of that? What's going to be learned and that's going to be of benefit to the person? And that's where we can maybe pick up this document here, but go ahead.
The neurotransmitter testing is looking at an array of the different brain chemicals that we have that affect our cognitive function, our mood, our sleep, our ability to process thoughts and have memory recall. So we're looking at neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, GABA levels, epinephrine, norepinephrine, glycine levels, glutamate levels. We're looking at the different brain chemicals that affect our mood and our cognitive function, our sleep, our wake cycles, all of that. And the reason why I think that's so important is because it's not always a serotonin issue. And the majority of the antidepressants and anti-anxieties that are out on the market from the pharmaceutical companies are targeted at serotonin levels. There are other pharmaceuticals that will also target GABA or dopamine, but the majority of them out there are targeting specifically serotonin. But how do you know if it's a serotonin issue? Everyone assumes that it's always a serotonin issue with that specific brain chemical. And look at what's going on around our country with people having horrible, horrible reactions to these pharmaceuticals that are called SSRIs that are specifically targeting the neurotransmitter serotonin. If people are having a horrible response to it, it's most likely that it's not a serotonin issue. And so by looking at the brain chemical testing, we can see what other brain chemicals or what other neurotransmitters are potentially involved in contributing to their depression, their anxiety, their brain fog, their memory recall issues. And then we can target those things specifically by addressing it through lifestyle and nutrition, and by understanding the biochemistry of what helps you make the neurotransmitters and what helps you to break them down. And that's where we want to look at all of the different tests so that we can see what's going on. For example, if someone has, if you have someone who has a chronic parasitic pattern, if they're having parasites, and we know that with parasites there's oftentimes a lot of heavy metal issues that go along with parasites, well, that's going to affect the brain chemistry, right? So it's not enough to look at the brain chemical test and see, for example, that there is too much GABA in the brain or too little dopamine. We need to see what's causing it. So by looking at other ancillary testing, we can see, oh, well, look, you have some toxic heavy metal loads here, and you also have a parasitic pattern. We need to address this, and in turn, these neurotransmitter levels in your brain are going to level out. Or if there is a thyroid issue, we need to understand, why is there a thyroid issue? Oh, your doctor put you on a no rinse high fluoride toothpaste and told that you don't rinse from your mouth, and over the last 6 months your thyroid has gone into the toilet. Then we need to address not the thyroid. There's not something wrong with the thyroid. It's the environmental toxins that are affecting the thyroid function. And when we eliminate the environmental toxins, then the thyroid will function properly, and then that is going to affect the brain chemistry function.
Yeah.
So you could have someone with a parasite, heavy metal, and thyroid issue, and you've got to address all of those factors so that so that the brain chemistry can balance itself. The body can heal itself if you remove the interferences.
I feel like really aligned with you, and I think that that's where a lot of functional medicine goes wrong, where they're looking at these numbers and they're looking at ways to prop this up just through supplements or something like that. But the issue there is often not looking at, there's every reason, I think God has designed the body so this would all be at an equilibrium. It's designed to be that way. What has impeded its ability to be at equilibrium and to be balanced? Well, let's have a look at those triggers. Let's look at these things that are interfering with the system that are not natural in the body. Is there a parasitic infection, heavy metal toxicity, and fluoride, gluten sensitivity, which I think is actually a universal thing, even though people have not really bit the bullet on that. I think that our bodies are supposed to be sensitive against things that are bad, right? My body has a petrol sensitivity. I don't drink petrol, right? And because of the genetic modifications that are happening to foods and their indigestible aspects, proteins entering the bloodstream, leaky gut, these things then continue to compound and affect all of these things. And I think that, because I have seen cases where people were bipolar and they went paleo, and even though paleo is not my diet of choice, the upside with the paleo diet, they don't do grains, and particularly the gluten
gluten
wheat.
grains, yeah.
Whereas I'm not necessarily a no grain guy either, but because he eliminated the gluten because of this protocol, and he did it for vanity, he did it because of bodybuilding purposes, he was finally happy for the first time
in the process, his diagnosis suddenly went away. Yeah, so I can't tell you how many times that I have had people come to see me who have been diagnosed with bipolar. We get them off of gluten and they don't have another episode. And then of course they go back and they'll try it 6 months later. And then they're coming in the next week telling me that they had 4 days of manic depressive episode after they ate bread, even if it was organic bread. The fact that they had gluten triggered their manic depressive episode. I've seen it over and over and over again.
Wow. And then it's interesting that you can look at the suicide rates of people with celiac disease. It's twice as high as the general public. And then I don't believe those suicides are because people are like, dang it, I can't eat pizza, I'm going to kill myself. That's not the reason. It's because it's interfering with gut microbiome, which is all about brain chemistry. And I'm a big guy, I'm a big believer in discrediting Big Pharma's attempts to make us believe that we have chemical imbalances of the brain that are the causes, and that it's originating here. Right?
It doesn't originate there most of the time. Mm-hmm. It does not originate there most of the time. Yeah,
they're the rare circumstances where something, but even those things are typically triggered somewhere else, and that's because you can't feed your brain, like put things directly in there. The drugs are still going to go through your digestive system, and then so everything's coming through this channel. And we know that leaky gut, intestinal permeability leads to leaky brain, which is just a really important link for people to make, and understanding brain cognition, depression, mood disorder, and things like this. Would you agree?
I completely agree. We have the same glial cells in our gut as we do in our brain. We have the same tissues in our gut and in our brain. That's common knowledge amongst it's common knowledge amongst holistic practitioners that your gut is your second brain. Mm-hmm. And we can use food to heal ourselves. What people don't realize is that a lot of the foods that they've been eating are poison to them. And our job is to teach them what foods that they're putting in their body that is literally killing them. It's like putting diesel in a gas engine. You can't do that. It's not going to work, right? So when you're eating genetically modified, pesticide-filled foods that are poisonous to your body, what do you think is going to happen? Your body is going to slowly break down until you finally end up in some disease process. But you can turn it around by understanding what foods that you can eat to heal yourself. People need to We need to teach people to not be so disconnected from what they're putting into their body. People are killing themselves every day with the foods that they're eating, and they have no idea that that is what's contributing to their health problems.
Yes, yes, so true. And sometimes people, they don't know because they also don't want to know. That's not always the case, and it's typically not the case in the sense that most people don't know that food influences mood. They do understand it influences health, so that's where we are at fault, because we know what we're eating influences health, but yet people, it's that inconvenient truth. Yet when you understand this, you start to understand that the foods that are best for your body and your brain are the most delicious foods. They really actually are, and they're the most nutrient dense. That your body sings when it's on it, and then it just takes a transformation, what I would call a conversion, right?
It takes a transformation. It takes a commitment, and it takes a little coaching to learn how to do it. You see, people think that because the food is available in the grocery store, that it must be okay. Oh,
even at Whole Foods, right?
Even at Whole Foods, if it's if they're selling it, it must be safe. If the FDA allows it, I shouldn't have said that. If it's on the shelves, it must be okay. It must be healthy for us. Oh, look, it's fortified. Oh, it must be healthy. If you have to fortify anything, you shouldn't be eating it. Shop from the outside of the grocery store. Don't go down the aisles. Shop from the outside. Stay organic.
I love that. Love that. And if you're on a real budget, Dirty Dozen Clean 15 can be a real way to get around it. Looking for non-organic avocados will be quite fine, and the list goes on of things that you can consume in that. But then avoid other foods like berries, like the plague, if they're not organic, because it's just not worth it. You're battling depression, and you're putting in chemicals into your gut, and you're expecting that to help you. No, it's not going to help.
You're actually making yourself worse.
Yeah, you'd be better off avoiding that food. If you can't afford it, just avoid that food, and you'll be fine on other foods. It's not the only food. People around the world are surviving and thriving off a more limited supply of food than what we have. But if it's fresh, if it's real, if it's largely organic, you're on the right track.